Hey everyone, it's Professor Clark, and welcome to Chapter 7. If you are doing this as part of the regular semester schedule, this is probably the first lecture of the spring semester. Otherwise, you're just carrying on as was. Either way, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is quite challenging. We go over some stuff that is important, but a little technical. I won't hide it. But we're going to start off with a review of Katori clauses. And this is not technically a part of Chapter 7, but I wanted to go over how to use Katori clauses before we jump into the main part of Chapter 7, which is participles, because it's hard to understand participles unless you understand Katori clauses, and also some students struggle with Katori clauses and find a review helpful. So let's start off by looking at how to use Katori. So what is Katori? Katori can be a little challenging for English-speaking students. It's not actually that complicated, but it is something that's a little bit different from how we do it in English, and it requires a really firm grasp of case endings and just when to use which case. So that is challenging because this is kind of like your big final exam on when and how to use cases and case endings. So with that in mind, let's go over when and how we use Katori. So Katori is used to link complex sentences, so sentences that have several parts to them. And it's the equivalent of who, which, or that. So, for instance, this is the Russian student whom I met in Moscow last year. We would use Katori in the place of whom. This is the Russian student who moved to New York. We would use Katori for who. This is the book that I'm reading. We would use Katori for that. So that's when we use Katori. The other thing about Katori is it is a regular hard stem adjective and takes hard stem adjective endings. So this is the tricky bit, not the endings themselves in that they're completely regular, but just you have to know all the endings, all the adjective endings, and you have to know when and how to use them. Let's start by looking at some examples of how Katori is used in Russian. So we could say, for instance, «Это студент, который занимается в библиотеке каждый день». This is the student who studies in the library every day. Or, это студент, которого я давно знаю. This is the student whom I've known for a long time. Это студент, с которым я давно знакома. This is the student with whom I've been acquainted for a long time. Это студент, о котором я тебе рассказывала. This is the student I was telling you about. Or, это студент, у которого новый учебник. This is the student who has a new textbook. So with these examples, hopefully you're getting a glimpse of how Katori is used, or you are remembering how Katori is used. Let's go over, on the next slide, let's go over some rules. So, rules for Katori clauses. Katori refers to the main noun in the sentence, or implied noun. Sometimes you don't have a noun, but almost always you're going to have a noun, and Katori will refer back to that main noun in the sentence. So in the previous examples, that noun was student. Katori takes its gender and number from the noun it refers to. So again, looking back at those previous examples, student is masculine singular, so Katori was always masculine singular too. However, and this is where it gets tricky, Katori takes its case from its own clause, so that may be different from the case of the noun it refers to. For example, это студент, которого я давно знаю. This is the student whom I've known for a long time. Student in that sentence is the predicate and it's nominative. This is the student, something is something, predicate. But Katori in that sentence is the direct object of the verb znat, and so is accusative. Because student is a masculine animate noun, Katori is also going to be masculine animate, and it's going to therefore take genitive endings when it is the direct object of a verb. So, это студент, которого я давно знаю. Который can be the subject or object of a verb in its clause, and it can also be the object of a preposition. So for instance, это студент, который учится здесь. This is the student who studies here. Который is the subject of the verb учиться. Это студент, которого я давно знаю. This is the student whom I've known for a long time. Который is the direct object of the verb знать. Это студент, с которым я давно знакома. Который in that instance is the object of the preposition с. And then as far as word placement, this is one of the instances that are not very common in Russian, but this is one of the few instances in Russian where word order is very important. Который is always the first unit in its clause. Frequently, its clause is going to be the second clause in the sentence, and then который is going to be the first unit in that clause. If it is the subject or object of a verb, it will be the first word in the clause. For example, это студент, который здесь учится, or это студент, которого я давно знаю. However, if it is the object of a preposition, it will immediately follow the preposition because a preposition plus its object is one syntactical unit, and the object always has to come directly after the preposition. So, это студент, с которым я давно знакома. С которым is one syntactical unit, and so it is the first unit of the clause, but the actual word который is going to be the second word in the clause. Это студент, с которым я давно знакома. And then finally, который clauses are always set off by commas. So you always have to have a comma right before который, and then if there's another clause after the который clause, you're going to have a comma between the который clause and that other clause as well. This might all be a lot of information and seem kind of confusing, so let's look at some more examples. All right, examples. This time I'm using a feminine inanimate noun instead of a masculine animate noun as I had in the previous slide with examples. So, эта книга, которая у меня есть. This is the book that I have. And notice that которая there is the subject of the sentence or the subject of the clause, and so it is nominative. Эта книга, которая у меня есть. And then in the next sentence, we have эта книга, которую я читаю. This is the book that I am reading. Now it is the object of the verb читать, and so it is in accusative. Then we have эта книга, о которой я тебе рассказывала. This is the book I was telling you about. Here, it is the object of the preposition о, and so it is in the prepositional case. And note that it is the first unit in the clause, but it is the second word in the clause because it comes immediately after the preposition that modifies it. Now we have a couple more complicated sentences. Let's look at the first one. Книгу, о которой я тебе говорила, мне подарила мама на день рождения. The book I was telling you about, my mother gave me for my birthday, or my mother gave me the book I was telling you about for my birthday. And notice here how we have this который clause that is in the middle of a three-clause sentence. So, книгу, comma, о которой я тебе говорила, comma, мне подарила мама на день рождения. My mother gave me the book I was telling you about for my birthday, or the book I was telling you about my mother gave me for my birthday. And note here that книга in this sentence is the direct object of the verb подарить, and so is in the accusative. And then который, which refers back to книга, is the object of the preposition о and is therefore in the prepositional. Книгу, о которой я тебе говорила, мне подарила мама на день рождения. Here we have a similar but slightly different sentence. Книга, которую мне подарила мама на день рождения, мне очень понравилась. The book my mother gave me for my birthday really pleased me, or I really liked the book that my mother gave me for my birthday. Once again, we have three clauses in this sentence, and they're all set off by commas. So, книга, comma, которую мне подарила мама на день рождения, comma, мне очень понравилось. However, in this case, kniga is the subject rather than the object of the verb. It's the subject of the verb понравиться. So it is in the nominative, while который is the object of the verb подарить and is in the accusative. Книга, которую мне подарила мама на день рождения, мне очень понравилась. And those might seem like kind of complex sentences to a lot of English speakers. English speakers tend not to write out such complex sentences, although we certainly use them in spoken English. We are just not maybe as aware that that's how we talk. But this is very common in Russian. And so don't be afraid of these longer complex sentences. They're very common in Russian. And because of the case endings, it's really easy to keep track of what's going on. So that is a quick review of Katori clauses. I hope you found it helpful. This should help set you up for the real topic of the chapter, which is participles. So next up, we will start talking about participles. I hope you're looking forward to it.